right, I got some intros for these guys really quick. When selecting CTOs, we just alphabetize the list. Not really, this is total chance. So first, Ashwin is the co-founder and CTO of Decagon. If you're not familiar, it's a generative AI startup that's transforming, like customer experience. So customer support, chat, really excited to have you here. Allan is the CTO of Webflow, so he leads the global engineering team there. Previously, he was the CTO of Shopify, you might have heard of that company, and also SVP at Slack, CTO at ServiceNow, so worked at a lot of big titans. And then, of course, Albert, here at the end, is currently the CTO of Rippling, where he brings a lot of experience scaling engineering teams. There, previously, he led engineering at Segment. So thank you guys so much for joining us. This is great. All right, so let's dig in and get started. So I have a bunch of questions here. I think the first one I wanted to start with, all of you have businesses that are at this growth stage right now, scaling rapidly into the enterprise upmarket, doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And I know that in the CTO role, you're constantly talking to customers. You're not just writing code with the team, you're actually out connecting with the market. What are you seeing customers freak out about right now? In the era of AI and this disruption, are you seeing adaptation? Are you seeing panic? What are you seeing from the market right now? Let's start there.
I think for a big chunk of our customers, it's not panic, but more of, especially within the enterprise, it's more of how do I adopt this new technology that is going to be interfacing, at least in our case, interfacing directly with our end consumers in a way that does not hurt our brand or our business, right? Because these AI agents today they're not deterministic, right? So it is impossible to say it will only ever say these things. It will never, under any circumstances, ever say these things, right? So a lot of the concern is around how do we ensure that there are appropriate guardrails in place. If something goes wrong, we can find and catch it quickly. And for people that are in more regulated spaces, how do we engage with our regulators and show them, hey, here are the controls that we have in place to roll this out? Because the value to a lot of these companies is very clear, both in terms of the direct ROI and efficiency gains that their businesses have, but also in terms of the enhanced experience that they can give to their customers. Because now, instead of having support for 8 hours a day, you get it 24 hours a day on demand for everybody. But the question is, how do we do this responsibly, given that we are entrusting our brand and our relationship to our customers with these AI agents?
Yeah.
I think ours is somewhat similar. I can answer it from an engineering perspective, but our customers are marketing teams. And marketing teams that are concerned about their brand and how their brand shows up in these chatbots and these agents. So for dozens of years, people have learned SEO. Right? They knew how to get to the top of the 10 blue links. They knew how to buy the right AdWords. They knew how to drive organic traffic. So if you're a website producer and you want people to land on your website for some sort of conversion, you spend a lot of time thinking about how do I get people to this landing page, to this particular form, to this particular buying spot on the website. And now they're like, someone types into ChatGPT, give me the best authorization software platform, and who knows how that shows up. So there's this whole thing called AI SEO or AEO, Answer Engine Optimization, and we spend a lot of time building products that basically allow people to do that. So Decagon, customer of ours, thank you very much. You could basically go in and you could say, optimize my website and the messaging on my website and the alt text and the various components of my website so it shows up properly inside of Claude, inside of ChatGPT. So from my customer's perspective, not my engineering team, but from my customer's perspective, they are freaking out about how do they get the right presence, the right brand, the right visibility in these new answer engines, in these new, AI chat tools.
Yeah, I think for us, our customers know they need to do something with AI about AI. I don't think they always know exactly what. And so it's really about partnering with them, figuring out use cases inside of their companies, whether it's HR software, IT software, finance software, how can they leverage AI in those various contexts. I also think there's been a couple of waves of AI. There were the less intelligent chatbots, kind of like AI in name, but not really, I guess the full promise of AI. I think there's a second wave now with agents, and so customers are starting to figure out what good looks like here, but they still need a lot of help, kind of like parsing through the hype. And so I think just like working closely with them, partnering with them, sharing, what's possible. Like that's where we're doing a lot of work.
It's funny. Go ahead.
I was going to say the other funny thing about enterprise adoption of AI is I think both these gentlemen just did it because I'm very happy that both of them are Decagon customers. So some forward-leading, very forward-leading.
Absolutely.
Yeah, ahead of the pack. Yeah. Although you guys have grown a lot, there's a lot of customers. It's funny you mentioned chatbots. Chatbots are something, they're kind of back again, but actually they work now, right?
Exactly.
Which is kind of miraculous. Do any of you have thoughts on things that maybe aren't working yet that you think will start working? Like things maybe that people are, maybe a little bit bearish around today, but you think the models might make better?
So we've been thinking about this a lot, and I think there are a number of use cases that work well today with the capability of models and some that aren't quite there yet. And the rough shape that we've seen is when you can very clearly articulate the model what it's supposed to do, even if it's multi-step, you need to put in a lot of engineering legwork, but you can get it to do that. And support, which is one of our primary use cases today, falls into this category, right? Like there is a relatively finite set of things in the world that a customer could come in and ask you to do, and when you do them, there are clearly defined operating procedures on how you need to handle that. And I think AI agents tend to be pretty good at things like that, right? Where the steps are known and it's just a job of executing them with some creativity. I think there are a few other use cases where I think it's a little bit earlier, right? So when you think about things like sales, right? Where it's a lot about building relationships, being kind of quick on your feet to do discovery well and like really honing in on what the customer cares about. That I think where when you have so much kind of ambiguity in the task, I think the models aren't quite there yet today.
I think it's about context. And what I mean by that is like there's a lot of things that AI can do. There's a lot of things that AI can do when they build and they have the right context. I get 700,000 emails or LinkedIn messages a day that refer to a company that I worked at 4 or 5, 7 years ago. And I just think that AI and agentic workflows, which is just basically a workflow that's using AI, I think there's a lot of promise there. But I think unless you know the context, unless you know the environment in which you need to produce the right answers, and right now there's a lot of time being spent on building that context, both from the engineering side and even on the support side. If you don't build that context properly, then you do worry about, is it going to ask me about my days at ServiceNow 10 years ago? Or is it going to send me an email that's completely out of context? Or is it going to give me a code suggestion that's completely out of context? Or is it give me an answer for support that has no idea that, yes, I'm already on this plan as opposed to on that plan, sort of thing. And that's where you get into things like guardrails and context setting. So for me, like the promise of AI, I think it can do an awful lot. But I think the thing that's not there yet is, I don't know if it's a context window is the right way to think about it, but greater understanding of how to use AI in a given environment.
Do you have a sense of when that'll get better or anything? When you think about it, is it a
between
6-month problem or like a 6-year problem?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it could be a 6-month problem. It could be
well-placed bet.
It could be a 6-minute problem from now. I go ask the guys 2 miles from here, but I don't know, to be honest with you. I'll know it when I see it.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I think with a lot of this stuff, the only safe prediction is no prediction. I think building on the context point, it's really things like memory, managing what is in the context window in the first place. Something we're working on is, disambiguation, like as the model, like reasons over structured data, exactly what part of the data are you trying to interact with. I think something I'm keeping a close eye on is models writing small bits of code running in sandboxes to improve their ability to interact with structured data. It feels like there's still a lot of work we can do to make them really, really good at that. Obviously, the coding models are figuring a bunch of these things out in general, but I think they can also be specialized to some extent. So between context and code writing, it feels like a lot of stuff can still get a lot better.
I can't think of the number of times I've been in Cursor or in Augment code. I'll say, no, that's wrong. Go look here instead.
Yeah.
And then it'll figure it out a little bit better, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you got to poke it to go the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll get smarter. You mentioned AI writing code, Albert. And I know when we were catching up, it was a few weeks ago or a couple months ago, you mentioned that you were starting to write a lot more code yourself in the CTO role. And I've heard this from other CTOs as well at companies. You know, if you remember the founder mode essay from Paul Graham last year, is there like a CTO mode happening now where folks are getting back into the code and able to ship stuff due to AI?
I don't want to overstate how much code I'm writing, but
Go for it.
It did feel important, maybe 6-9 months ago, to show the team what was possible. And so I had a weekend where I sat down and produced about 130 pull requests to upgrade a bunch of dependencies in our code base. And prior to that moment, the team was telling me, hey man, like this is going to take 6 months, we don't know, multi-quarter. And so it's like proving what's possible was very important. And I could then come back a week later, and it was our team in Poland. They had like seized on that little anecdote, like, oh, Albert did 130 pull requests in a weekend, and like went 100x further from that idea, building a bunch of tools, automating a bunch of stuff. So that's maybe CTO mode, is just like proving what's possible, and then you can let the team run from there.
I'm in the exact same boat. I have a lot more pull requests these days, but a lot of them are MCP generated than anything else. So a couple of examples I can think of. I wrote a quick little workflow. We have a Slack channel called UX Paper Cuts. So it's all the little nitnoid stuff that people find in the product they don't like, automatically files a Jira. So I used MCP to talk to Jira, pull the context out of that Jira, put it into Augment, generate the PR, ship it back, and push it into the code. I did like 100 over a weekend once, and people are like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I'm just trying to show the art of the possible here. And it's just fascinating to see what you can do. And also just, I haven't been a daily code driver in a long time, but the thing that's nice about sort of the code gen tools out there is I don't have to be I don't have to be perfect in syntax anymore. I can kind of almost like leet code it a bit, say, turn this into TypeScript and make it work, and it does. And I think that's been really, really powerful. We have a belief within Webflow's engineering when we're shipping out to millions of websites and trying to scale up things as fast as we do. We want to basically ship by showing. So engineering teams come with prototypes. We do mock-ups. Even our product teams these days show up with code prototypes. We have a code gen tool in the product as well. So they're using our own product to develop new product using code gen. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of more people leveraging that CTO mode or just bring the code and show it to me mode.
Yeah, I think that that last point is particularly interesting. We've seen that a lot also, which is this idea of PMs building prototypes.
Yeah.
And now, of course, these aren't necessarily production-ready prototypes that you can put into our core code base, but they're able to kind of build out the UX that they care about a lot, iterate on it themselves, go show it to actual users and say, hey, click around this, see what you can do, and actually make a lot more progress before it actually gets handed over to an engineering team that can then implement now a more final version of it, as opposed to build out an initial version and then do a lot of iteration code, which takes more time.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think for us, getting to the point where product managers and designers realized that they could fix things themselves using Cursor and Slack, like that's been a massive unlock, and suddenly a lot more people are fixing little things quickly. So it's really cool to see.
How else is your engineering teams evolving and changing with AI? I'm kind of curious, like what, we're talking about that changing, giving PMs the keys to write code, which is, can be dangerous or wonderful. What else is evolving? I'm curious, like what maybe is like a novel thing that is changing. When we caught up the other day, one thing I heard from these guys was a lot of how you're running the company is not changing, actually, today. It's kind of operationally the same, even with these tools. So I'm curious, like, where you're seeing the changes and where you're maybe not yet today.
I think maybe one subtle shift is, I think people are more willing to take on, ambiguous, kind of like the long tail of cleanup type projects. One thing that caught my eye was, over the summer, the single heaviest user of Cursor at Rippling was an intern in Bangalore. Like, she was, the single busiest person, over 1,000 engineers at the company with Cursor, like doing a massive migration in the front end code base. And so I think going back a few years, certainly the intern is not the person powering this big cleanup or big migration project. So I think that's been at least one shift that I'm seeing.
Leaning into that a lot, we see that as well. What I find is that engineers don't have to tap someone on the shoulder to understand a different part of the code base. They can actually ask the code. They can go read the code. They can say, explain it to me like I'm 5 and look at a particular function, a particular library. So that's meant two things. One, it means that teams are much more mobile across projects because they're not scared of going to a different part of the code base because they can learn it faster. And the second thing I've seen is junior engineers are moving up the engineering career ladder far faster than they used to. So we're hiring junior engineers and pretty large cohorts of junior engineers. And we see them going from what we call IC1s up to IC3s, like in 18 months as opposed to 3 years. And the reason is because, again, they don't have to find the one guy in Bangalore or one gal in Seattle that understands exactly this feature and function. They can ask the AI and learn about the code base and become more educated in how to make an impact faster. So I think AI leveraging folks earlier in their career to make an impact is definitely something that I've seen.
It's funny that you said that because it's interesting also that you said that because this is the direct opposite of what you sometimes see on Twitter, which is, no one early career is going to have a job anymore.
I know. My answer is I'm happy to hire them.
Yeah.
Yeah, likewise.
The thing that we've seen, and this is probably from a slightly different angle, is because AI is a core part of our product and it's like a primitive that our engineering teams use, the interesting thing has been watching them adapt to a new component in their kind of tool belt that behaves very differently than everything else, right? Because the thing with code before, when you're building with code, the number one thing that you have is reliability and deterministic output, right? And that completely goes out the window with LLMs. And given that this is now a pretty big part of our code base, the thing that's been interesting is how do you deal in your code with LLMs behaving badly, right? So you might say, I want to have this LLM that does one step here in my code base to return this value if this thing happens and return this other value if another thing happens. But now in your code, you cannot take that return value as a fact, right? Maybe the LLM will say, hey, I got this totally crazy input, and you have to learn how to handle that gracefully because 1% of the time, your LLM might just give you a garbage answer. So the way that you write code around these models has to change a lot to be able to sort of handle the LLM behaving badly a lot more gracefully because 1% of the time it'll just happen. And you can't have your piece of software, throw an error 1% of the time. So this kind of shift in how people write code has been interesting to watch as well.
It's interesting. We've applied a bunch of workflows. So we give every engineer Cursor, we give them all Augment Code, we give them all ChatGPT teams, we give them all these tools to do things with AI. And we found is that people are writing workflows to do things like automate my PR descriptions. We have a tag on the PRs. You can say AI linter, and it'll actually go through and lint the code for you and then hopefully find those corner cases. So we don't quite have a bunch of the code necessarily being written by LLMs sort of on their own, but we basically have LLMs doing a bunch of the work and then having workflows behind it that are more linting and watching that a little bit of human in the loop. But it is fascinating to watch how quickly things iterate in this world.
Yeah, I think building on that, communication inside of teams seems to be changing. For the longest time, it was a struggle for us to convince a fast-moving engineer to write a detailed PR description. That entire class of problem is gone, right? Please still read the AI summary, in the PR description and make sure it makes sense. But getting people to write down things, has become a lot cheaper. Consuming that content, again, is becoming a lot cheaper. I think engineers see reasons to document the code base now because it helps the agents work better, either in the code or in agents.md or whatever. So I almost feel like engineers are finally embracing writing again, or for the first time maybe, and so that's kind of cool to see.
One of my favorite prompts is, please generate a readme.md, and I'll go back and read it over to make sure it actually makes sense, and then I'll say, no, you got that wrong, try again. But then it generates at least like a starting point, so I don't have to think through that mental tax of how do I document this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, getting engineers to write the docs has always been the impossible problem.
It's easy now.
Yeah.
Good thing that LLMs are good at writing.
It does beg the question, though, if the AI is generating the pull request, and then you have one of these like AI testing services that's reading the generated pull request description, is it just like AI in, AI out? Is there a risk of that?
I think there's certainly a risk. I mean, something we have been emphasizing internally is that the human still owns the final output. Like you cannot say, oh, is AI generated and AI reviewed, and I kind of wash my hands of the final product. So I do think, I mean, maybe one day we're all really out of a job, but that seems like it's a while from now. And so, the team still has to own the final software product and ensure that it is high quality. So I don't, you have to fight that mindset, I guess. Yeah.
We're the same way. You build it, you ship it, you run it in prod 24/7, so you're responsible for it. So we expect humans to be there. But a corollary to what you brought up, Michael, something that I've thought a lot about is really the reason the LLMs generate code is for humans to read it. What if humans don't read it? Then shouldn't it just generate machine code and move on with their lives? Like this, seriously. Like
If the tests pass.
Yeah, exactly.
I would actually love a world in which AI generates the code, AI tests the code, and it ships to prod. Like I think, today we're mostly limited by the fact that the models aren't there yet, right? And I think, I don't know, I'm curious to get both of your thoughts as well. But in this world, let's say 6 months, 12 months, 18 months into the future, where AI, given a good prompt, the cursor agent, Devin, can give you a very high quality PR at the level of a staff engineer. I would love that. I think that would just substantially improve dev velocity. And so if it gets to the point where it's like, hey, you tell the AI what you want it to do, one of these agents goes back into the background, gives you a high quality PR that is then tested rigorously with another set of AI agents, I think that would actually probably decrease the rate at which bugs get shipped and substantially increase engineering velocity. I think that would be a great thing if it happened. I think the models, unfortunately, just aren't there yet today.
So we got AI doing the product research, AI making the PR, AI testing the PR, AI shipping it. And then it seems like we might have agents using the product on the other side. What are you seeing there? What's your guess in terms of agents using your products? I'm curious how you're thinking about making your own products ready for this world of, billions of autonomous machines that are out using these products. Is that something that's being incorporated into your product roadmap today, or is it more science fiction and fantasy?
No, we're shipping that today. I mean, websites which used to be seen by humans, I don't remember the exact number, but it's north of 20 or 30% of the actual hits we see on websites are robots these days. So they're the AI companies scraping the content, and they're also agents out there reading the websites. So if your website doesn't have an FAQ, get an FAQ on there, because they always look for FAQs and they parse them in a particular way. So we're in the process of producing website content for the millions of websites we run, both for human consumption and for bot consumption and agent consumption. And our customers are doing that right now. So they're actually seeing those different traffic patterns. We have analytics that show people how much was seen by humans, which pages were seen by humans, which forums and pages were seen by bots. So that world is there, at least from a web presence point of view, especially since our customer is the marketing team that wants that web presence. They're today ready for humans and bots and agents to see that content. And that's evolving very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think the big push for us, I mean, if you think about rippling, HR, IT, finance, there's a lot of bad things that can happen there, right? You can pay the wrong person the wrong amount of money. There's certain regulations. There's compliance, etc. What we're focusing at the moment is having the agent prepare, some kind of change for an admin, or do some research ahead of a change being made. And so I think that's kind of the focus for us. It's still a human in the loop at the end kind of process, and you want to make sure that this, delta that is about to be applied to the system is understood by the human, and that the thought that went into it is carefully explained to them too. So I don't think we're quite ready to put the hire button or the terminate button in the hand of the agent. But a lot of the work that human analysts might be doing on top of this data is what we're trying to streamline.
On behalf of all humans, thank you.
Yes, our pleasure.
I got one last question, and then I'm really excited to open it up to the audience here. So start thinking of what questions you might ask these folks. A lot of folks here in the audience are building new companies, starting new startups, or maybe joining early stage companies, and they're building their products, for this AI native era, where things are very different, obviously. What advice would you give them on how to think about maybe architecting their product from a technology aspect, or maybe even just thinking about delivering product to this new generation of customers? What do you think they should be mindful of today getting started?
So I think pretty much the only thing that matters, is providing value to the end customer. I think if you are just starting a company, you should put extremely little thought into, what is my tech stack going to look like? How do I build that out? I think the interesting kind of opportunity that has opened up today with the invention of, with the advent of AI agents is that you could take things that previously only human beings could do and replace that end to end, right? And this is a very new value proposition for enterprises, right? It's either, hey, I used to have to pay, X million dollars to get this thing done. Now I can do it more cheaply. And either that is because I want to save money and become more efficient, or because I want to do this 10 times as much as I was doing it before. So I think if you're a founder starting a new company doing this, the only thing that you should be focused on is what are the set of human workflows that I think AI agents can do well today. I think if you can answer that question well, you can make mistakes on every other part of the thing. You can architect it incorrectly. You can use the wrong tech stack. All of those are completely solvable problems as long as you get the main thing correct, which is this is the value that I'm providing to my end customer.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I spend a lot of time thinking about product market fit. I've done it for a bunch of startups as well. Getting that product market fit is fascinating and hard. I'd add one more piece, and we've all seen the graphs of, Windsurf and, Lovable and all these graphs just go straight up. So once you get product market fit, get ready for scale. So when we think about, like, on our side, if one of our customers has a website or a workflow or a form that just scales up vertically, like, we need to be ready for that. And I think that our customers also need to be ready for that. So I think a lot about product market fit, and then I think about once I've hit it, how do I think about that 10x scale? I'm always thinking about the next order of magnitude. And if you're not planning for that next order of magnitude, you're pretty much planning to fail.
Yeah, I think for me, thinking about PMF and delivering value, something Ashwin and I were chatting about is, I think it's the era of the forward deployed engineer and then probably the forward deployed founder right now. And so really, as we figure out, what these models are capable of, what can even be built, like working very closely with customers, building, side by side with them, and then, taking some of that learning back to the rest of the engineering teams seems really important. And so I think companies emphasizing this co-building with customers are going to rise to the top in the next while.
For a bunch of CTOs, you sound like you don't care about the technology that much. It's a lot more about the product market fit, the customer value, and the business. I think that there's a something there. All right, with that, I'd love to open it up to questions from the audience. If you get the house lights up, please just raise your hand, wave it around so I can see you, and I'll call on a few of you. Let's start right there in the blue.
Hi there, thank you all for coming in. Allan, question about scaling and following up there. I attended the Webflow conference you had last month.
Thank you.
Prompt to production. That's probably a great example that maybe you can share. Obviously at Rippling too, you're doing a lot of like the prompt chat bots of how you may onboard a new employee and request a laptop. This maybe goes with Ashwin's point too of model quality. Can you share a little bit more about, number one, how you're thinking about scaling those products? And number two, are you fine-tuning models? What are you thinking about open source versus frontier? Big question there, but would love to hear how you're thinking about it. Thanks.
Yeah, so our CodeGen, our prompt to production product, which is about basically CodeGen on top of websites, so custom code on top of websites. We are definitely using sort of the foundational models right now. We have done some prompt engineering around it, and we've done some evals and evaluation on the back end to make sure that that's all done properly. And in terms of scaling it, we have built we call it an AI Foundations library that allows us to move the new models, to allow us to rate limit, to allow us to send out the right queries at the right paces with the right amount of tokens to those models. So we're able to do that. We have not gone the open source model yet, but we do run some of our own models on AWS Bedrock as opposed to just querying OpenAI's API. And in terms of how we scale the product, that product we launched a couple weeks ago is just in the process of going to public beta. So once that launches, we're going to have to see that vertical line and get ready to scale it up. So we're excited.
You also brought up an interesting point around fine-tuning models. I think this is something that, interestingly enough, is not as discussed as I thought it would be. We train a lot of our own models in-house because what we found is the closed source models are not as steerable as you would think purely from prompt engineering. And so both for us internally and for several other companies that are running these models at scale that we've talked to, there's a pretty significant investment in building models in-house. Because, again, there's only so much kind of steerability and precision that you can get from these closed source models through just prompt tuning them.
Yeah, I don't think we've found the limits of the publicly available models yet, but as I'm sure with everyone else, it's a new kind of software engineering. You have to test these systems, lots of evals, seeing how they behave, carefully scrutinizing the traces, as these agents operate. Like it's almost like good old software engineering, again, but with a different kind of testing. So a lot of focus there.
Awesome. Other questions? First one I saw right there in the middle.
So this is to Ashwin, I guess. My question is because you've been hiring lately a lot of forward deployed engineers and AI product managers and so on. Is there any route for Decagon to become like a Shopify of customer support, like to open up to ISVs and different vendors, or would you be continuing to only implement yourself the Decagon IP?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. No, we're not, even today, we're not the only people that implement Decagon, especially for some of our very large enterprise customers. We partner with folks that help with a lot of the implementation. What we found is there today is a little bit of a need for deployed engineering work, especially for the last mile, because a lot of our customers tend to be very large enterprises. So I don't think that motion is necessarily going away for a while. But I also don't think it's a forever thing, because I think as platforms like Decagon mature over the years, I think a lot of it will become something akin to a Shopify, where you essentially have a broad swath of tools that you have available to you that can be configured in a million different ways. But I think up until that point, I think across the industry, across all the AI agent companies, forward deployed engineering will kind of remain to be a thing, whether internal or partnering with external folks.
Do you folks see forward deployed engineers? It's the latest hotness, I hear.
Yes. So we started our team about 9 months ago to support our App Studio launch. So essentially building business apps, with customers in rippling, and it's been hugely successful. And a couple of ex-Palantir folks, it feels like Palantir maybe birthed the FDE wave here, and just hearing that team on the phone with customers, it's really remarkable, like what they can get done. And we have them working with customers during the sales process. I mean, being really impactful for closing or getting close to closing some really big enterprise deals. And then also, after a customer has onboarded, as they try and unlock additional value from the platform, just showing them what's possible, kind of sparking their imagination, really helpful there too. So yeah, we're all in and, hiring a bunch of folks in that function.
I go back to my days at ServiceNow. We used to call this the Inspire team.
Inspire team.
Inspire team.
All right.
So we go inspire people. So we put engineers forward deploy inside and show them how to use the platform. We saw the same thing at Slack. I saw the same thing at Shopify. Yeah, it's definitely, as you start to build up platforms that have functionality that can't be explained in a quick slide deck, then you need people who are experts in deploying and using that platform for the needs of that business. So most of the platforms I've seen, including at Webflow, we call them solutions engineering, but they essentially embed with the marketing teams, teach them how to use the product, teach them how to make the websites perform best for their particular needs. Yes.
Awesome. Other questions? Right here.
Hello, everyone. So we're in a CTO panel, and I guess all of you agree on the role of code generation for engineers. One of the biggest promises of code generation is to help non-engineers or non-technical people to build products. Yet I talk to many CTOs in enterprise who see that as worrying, as is creating more shadow IT. So they are not in control of what their non-technical employees, be that marketing, sales, HR team are doing. I wonder, where do you stand in that, and if you allow your internal employees, aside from engineers, to experiment with vibe coding?
I'll just say yes. Yes, we have teams, again, in product, we have teams in sales, we have teams in solutions engineering doing vibe coding. They're doing it for demos, they're doing it for proof of concepts, they're doing it for understanding new product development. Some of them have actually pushed into our GitHub repo and show up in prod. It's more rare than you might think. But yes, we actually strongly encourage everyone in the company to do vibe coding with our own product, with our own code gen tools, and with other tools, and use it as a proof of concept, as a way to show us what you have in mind. I think there's nothing better, doing it in Google Slides or PowerPoint. No, do it in code and show it to us. Yes. Does it end up in prod? Pretty rarely, to be honest, right now.
I think given we are at the WorkOS summit, I think the concern often comes from security, actually, right? If you're like, hey, why doesn't everything that's vibe coded make its way into the product? It looks nice. Why doesn't it? And I think the concern often comes from security, right? Because given the state of the models today, it is not uncommon for them to not handle edge cases well that a normal talented developer would, or open up security vulnerabilities that a normal talented human developer would not make. I think hopefully as quickly as possible, when we get to the world in which we have code that is generated by AI agents, be akin to code that a human senior staff engineer would write, then I would be completely in favor of telling every employee at the company, go vibe code everything that you can, because I know the code that is generated is going to be very high quality. It's going to be maintainable and extensible, as opposed to something that was stuck onto the side. And I know it's not going to have security vulnerabilities and bugs. But I think until all of those three things happen, there's going to be some hesitation around having things that are vibe coded make its way into the kind of production product and primary code base. But I do think it's only a matter of time before those properties will be true.
I think two things perhaps hurt that in our environment. One is making sure it scales. Yeah. And then two, it's the interoperability with all the other products that we see a lot. So I'll let you talk. But
yeah, I think there's a big difference between a proof of concept with access to mock or staging data to communicate an idea of what that person needs the production software to do, and vibe coding something and opening a port to the internet. As long as you do the former and not the latter, you're going to be okay. But again, I don't know that anything has changed there, actually. It's just like, where does the vibe coded stuff get deployed and what does it have access to? That's the thing to think very hard about.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. The chosen person. Let's see. How about right there? Great.
I just wanted to get to know your thoughts on generative UI, if that's something that you're experimenting with or considering putting into your product, since it's like next level on top of vibe coding, where you're letting your users customize their experience. Is that too early, or what's your thoughts?
Yes, we definitely let our users, we build websites. So every user has their own brand, they have their own typology, their own taxonomy, they have their own look and feel, they have their own way that their sites are built. So from our perspective, every customer has their own user experience and their own way to build their site. So my short answer is absolutely, and that's how our product works.
For us, not as much in terms of generative UI, because we build a B2B product, so it's a lot more about, we have agents that build the Decagon AI agent now to, allow people to build these agents faster, test them faster, things like that, but not quite generative UI because it doesn't, it's not as used in our part of the world.
Yeah, I think we're probably somewhere in the middle where, essentially canvas elements in a chat, as you show a table of data or as you, present some small user interface to take an action in the product. But, it's not completely free form. And then I think at some point you want to steer the person towards the, the old school UI, for lack of a better term. But there are some elements of, UI in chat that we're working on.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have, unfortunately. Big round of applause, please, once again for our panel. Ashwin, Allan, and Albert, the 3 A's here at Enterprise Ready Conference. Thanks, guys.